Hey, warmer from Evo! Welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the Houston Family Podcast. We've got an excellent podcast for you as we're going to be joined in a few minutes by Curtis Rogers. He does such amazing work over at 710 Seattle Sports. Had to get him on because we saw the news about 24 to 48 hours ago, depending upon when you're listening to this, of Gonzaga deciding that they're going to be going to the Pac-12. I'll ask him a little bit of the nooks and crannies of it with regards to why now, why the Pac-12, but we're also going to be taking a look at Gonzaga for the upcoming season because while it's nice to be taking a look at this revamped Pac-12, while it's nice to be looking at what we're going to be getting in conference realignment a few years from now, this is a podcast that is dedicated to making you money and making you smarter in terms of what we're going to be seeing out there on the court this season. So we're going to be diving in to what we're getting out of Gonzaga for this year. If there's any teams in the WCC that can challenge Gonzaga in the interim before they head on over to the Pac-12, we're also going to be diving in just a little bit on the Pacific Northwest landscape because one of the teams that is currently not in the WCC that will be soon is out there in Curtis's neck of the woods in Seattle U. So we'll talk about them a little bit as well. And here in segment number 1, we are starting to see more and more of these media days, these media polls. These guys are first team, second team, all conference guys going into the season as well. And I'll give you guys why I just really don't care. I wish I could put it any other way, but I really don't care. I laid this out a little bit on the podcast yesterday. If you missed my chat with Ryan McIntyre of the Sports Gambling Podcast Network, fleshed out a little bit on some of the takeaways that can be good in terms of these media days, some of the stuff that can actually be good, nice, bettable information, and some of the stuff that is just fluff, and some of the stuff that you just really can't utilize. And quite frankly, if you're a fan of the team, well, it's great that you got to know their favorite song and their favorite foods, what have you. That is not going to help you get to the window, but this podcast is going to do its best to be able to do so. And if you do have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you do have one of two ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at GNet_D1. Keep in mind, letters DM, they mean does not matter. So as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. The other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. And then from there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review, as we're pretty much 30 days away from the start of the college basketball season, depending upon when you listen to this, so please do fire those in. I want to just get you guys as prepared for the upcoming college basketball season as humanly possible, so if there's something that's running through your mind, please do fire that in. I'm more than happy to discuss it as we've got only 3 conference previews remaining as well, so we got a few shows to fill in the meantime, so let me know if there's anything that you want to be hearing about. But in terms of these media days, it's nice that you get to know, alright, here's who the media is high on, here's what the coaches are high on as well. As many conferences, they do like a little bit of a coach's straw poll as well. And I will say this, if there is someone that is on like a first team or a second team that I am not breaking down right now and that I'm not aware of, then I am just flat out not doing my job. And it's that simple. There has really never been a case like that. But I think the biggest thing when it comes to the media polls is, let me just lay it out to you like this. In the old iterations of the Pac-12, during the first year in which you saw Tommy Lloyd take over, this was fresh off of Oregon State making that nice Elite Eight run, Arizona was ranked behind Oregon State in the Pac-12 preseason poll. If that's not reason enough to say, you know what, these preseason polls, nobody knows anything, there you go. And I'm one of those people that I trust myself in terms of my handicap. Like, I really don't utilize anything in terms of like the Bart Torvik stats, in terms of the Ken Pomeroy stats either. Not because they're not doing a bad job. As a matter of fact, I think that they do an absolutely amazing job, and I think that they are great resources for those that are looking to get into a little bit more college basketball. But I do want my perspective and I do want my handicaps to be independent of those. And you get into just the group think mentality, because how often don't we see it where a team makes a nice run in March, whether that be in the NCAA tournament, the NIT, what have you, and then everyone just jumps aboard the bandwagon. I want to try to separate myself from that. As a matter of fact, if I didn't go into sports broadcasting, if I didn't go into sports in general, I would have probably either considered going into philosophy or I would have considered going into psychology. So that is something that always does fascinate myself, because going into a season with any sport, because people are just jonesing to be able to get games back in their lives, or just wanting to be able to talk about stuff. I mean, you see it in the NFL most predominantly, where you see, Person X is in on the Philadelphia Eagles for the upcoming season, and wouldn't you know it, someone else has a take on the Philadelphia Eagles, and then someone else does, and then all of a sudden the Philadelphia Eagles go from being like a team that you expect to be, we're just going to spitball a number here, 10-7, and all of a sudden they think that they're going to win 12 or 13 games, when in reality, perhaps what we had projected to start with, what the numbers were saying, was really the correct evaluation of them, and I want to try to separate myself from that end. On top of that, some of these media members, they do like a really nice job in the mid-major ranks. Like, I would actually put a lot more stock in terms of the mid-major like rankings, in terms of mid-major guys are first team, second team, because those are guys that are really working hard. They're looking to work their way up into a bigger job, and those are the people that do, in my opinion, the most thorough job of looking at things, and I give them a lot of credit. So there is some mutual admiration to what they are able to do. When you get into the power conference level, they will give pretty much anyone a credential to a lot of these things. They all get pretty much a vote, and yeah, that's where things go down the toilet bowl. So that's my biggest takeaway in terms of these media days, and a big reason why if you see a team that might be shockingly high in terms of media poll, I really just do not care. Like I said on the podcast yesterday, though, if you're looking at media days and what is valuable, these coaches are asked about injuries, these coaches are asked about their rotations. They might not give the most truthful answer in terms of rotations, but that could be something that is useful. I know that we were talking with our good friend Rocco Miller a few days ago. He's going to be attending some of these media days. He's going to be trying to unearth some of that information, so I'm certainly looking at his Twitter side checks feed at RoccoMiller8. Our good friend who joined yesterday, and Ryan McIntyre, is going to be doing a great job as well. That's the sort of stuff that you want to be looking at from these media days, and the sort of stuff that is going to be very interesting moving forward in college basketball is what the heck is going to be happening with the Pac-12. We're going to talk a little bit about that with Curtis Rogers, and then expectations for the West Coast Conference this year, expectations for Gonzaga, and so much more. We'll be chatting about that next, right here on Coach Kids Hoops with myself, Greg Hughes Peters, and now a part of the VSiN Family Podcast. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hughes Peters, and now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. And it's always great to be joined by this man, as Curtis Rogers does absolutely tremendous work over at 710 Seattle Sports. During the baseball season, you were able to hear him on the Seattle Mariners calls, doing the pre- and post-game hosting over there. But on top of that, he's doing a great job, whether that's taking a look at the Seattle Seahawks, the Washington Huskies, or a team that is very much in the news right now in the Gonzaga Bulldogs. We have to talk about that and so much more, as you're able to follow Curtis on Twitter along with Instagram/X over at A Kid From Ken all together. And Curtis, it is always a pleasure, my friend. Thank you so much.
Greg, always happy to hop on. And yeah, very rarely do we see a college basketball program of Gonzaga's magnitude switch conferences. I mean, here in the state of Washington, over the last 18 months, I don't know if there's any state that has looked more different in terms of college basketball, in terms of conference realignment, in terms of head coaches, in terms of it all. And here in Washington, it seems to have impacted every single school in some way, shape, or form, Gonzaga being the latest. And obviously, that's going to send shockwaves through the college basketball world.
Hey, the good news is Eastern Washington has remained in the same conference. That is, like, to your point, I think the only school in the entire state that is either going to be in the same conference 2 years from now or hasn't just changed conferences, with Washington obviously going to the Big Ten this past off season. But let's start right there with Gonzaga, as they decide to take up the Pac-12 on their offer. And why do you feel like they took the Pac-12's offer rather than, say, a Mountain West offer, which I know has been on the table the last few years? We've always heard the rumblings in terms of Big 12, the Big East, what have you. What makes you think that the Pac-12's offer might have been a little bit better than that of, say, like a Big 12?
Boy, that's a great question. And I think the biggest reason why Gonzaga took this offer over any other conference's offer or any previous iteration of the Pac-12 is that now you're not going to see Gonzaga in conference play have, quad 3, quad 4 games. Most of their games are going to be in the first two quadrants. That's going to step things up in terms of competition. And I think this group of teams, this 8 teams right now that we have for college basketball, could really be an interesting bunch to watch out for. I believe it was just this last year, the Pac-12 combined had a lower ranking for the NCAA tournament than the current 8 schools do in the Pac-12. So I think that is a step up in competition. One, I mean, heck, they're still going to have, a lot of NCAA tournament units come their way when they do make the NCAA tournament. The pressure of the entire conference isn't going to fall on their shoulders so much. There's a little bit more there to carry them. But it is weird, too, when they've had, it feels like, multiple opportunities to leave the WCC to go to greener pastures. Why now? Still remains to be seen, but I think ultimately this is going to benefit the program. You're playing better competition. You're playing schools that have a great basketball reputation. I believe 6 of the 8 schools went to the NCAA tournament a year ago. So it's not to say that, this is a conference for chumps by any stretch of the imagination, but ultimately I think it came down to Gonzaga recognizing, like, hey, we need to step up our competition if we want to continue this run that we're on, because we've turned into an NBA factory, but we also want to develop our guys and have a great shot at winning national titles too.
Absolutely. And I was talking about this a little bit on the podcast yesterday, and I want to get your thoughts here. Do you think that perhaps with the juggernaut that football has become, we're going to be seeing a little bit more that is like football centric, and then maybe we get either A, basketball centric conferences, or B, conferences that involve everything except for basketball? Because there are some schools out there that they're Division I only in like hockey and baseball, what have you, and we haven't seen too much of that in terms of college basketball, and I think that we might be on the precipice of that.
I think ideally college sports kind of fractures off where college football becomes its own entity, and college basketball and college baseball and the Olympic sports kind of become their own thing. I think it's unfair to a lot of these smaller schools that are being asked to travel with the same travel guidelines that a lot of these Power 5 schools have right now, where you look at schools like Stanford and Cal, you look at how much they're going to have to travel. Football-wise, it's a little easier to absorb that travel fatigue when you're only flying out maybe Thursday or Friday of a game week. You're flying back Saturday night. You're only on the road for maybe 2 or 3 days at a time, where as with college basketball, you're hitting multiple cities on a road trip. You're gone from home for about a week at a time. It's not easy. And so I think a lot of these conferences now, I think the great thing that the Pac-12 has done so far in terms of their realignment is remain geographically centered in the West. You don't see too many teams further east. I believe Colorado State is the furthest east team in the new Pac-12, which kind of falls right in line with the old Pac-12 when Colorado was the furthest east. So ultimately, you want to see college sports be successful and reach all these, revenue goals that they have in mind for themselves. I think the best way for them to do that is going to be make college football its own thing, where it is a national sport, where college basketball, I feel like, is a lot more regional. You obviously spend most of your season playing conference games, playing teams that are close to your backyard. You don't see a lot of great non-conference teams later on in the season. It just is just not something that college basketball has ever done. So I think college basketball is much better in terms of its regionality over college football. And I would love to see one day where you see college football just kind of do its own thing, have, 75, 80 schools vying for a national championship, have another level below that. Maybe there's some relegation in there as well. But to me, I think the current system, with it being dictated by college football, is going to be tough, especially in the Pac-12, where they still need another team to join. They still need another school to join in order to keep that FBS certification under the NCAA. Gonzaga is a great ad for basketball, but it does nothing for football. And as we know, all of these conference realignment things are centered around football money and football TV revenue. And I still think Gonzaga going to the Pac-12 is an absolute coup for them. Like, you have a tentpole program in college basketball out here on the West Coast. So great move by them. But unfortunately, the job is not done for the Pac-12.
Yep, absolutely. And I think that it is going to be interesting to see what happens in the coming years in terms of realignment and in terms of travel that you were speaking to a little bit before. Bit easier in football when you play once a week rather than in college basketball where you're playing a lot of cases 2 times a week, sometimes even a little bit more than that. So I do think that that's a very important note as Curtis Rogers, who does such great work over at 710 Seattle Sports, he is joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And in terms of Gonzaga for this season, I don't see any reason why this team should not be leaving the WCC on a high note within the next 2 years. I think that they are set up very well for this year. I think that they are set up very well for next season. And not sure how you take a look at this bunch, but I feel like they were really able to gain some momentum towards the back half of the year last year with a rare non-conference game against Kentucky. And even though they're going to be without the man of steel and Steel Venters, I just still look at the backcourt. I still look at them having so many returning players along K-Leaf Battle, and I see one of the best teams in all of college basketball, in my opinion.
Yeah, you mentioned that game against Kentucky last year. There was at least some consideration of Gonzaga not making the NCAA tournament to that point. That really turned their season around, getting that win in Lexington, really, catapulting them the rest of the way. They make another Sweet 16, just as they've done in the previous 8 seasons. And I'm right there with you, Greg. I think this is a team on the short list of national title contenders. I know everybody hearing Gonzaga and national title, some people roll their eyes, but I roll my eyes at them because it is so hard to win a national championship in college basketball. Yes, UConn has made it look ridiculously easy the last 2 years. They're the outlier. That is not how it's normally done in college basketball. I think this backcourt is one that you could absolutely get to a Final Four with. Nolan Hickman and Ryan Nembhard, I mean, those two guys are battle tested. They have played a lot of big minutes in their careers. Hickman has had really, I think, linear trajectory in terms of his productivity in his career. Didn't play many minutes when he first got to Spokane, but now here he is starting. I think it is a imperative for Gonzaga to get great guard play this season in order for them to reach their highest ceiling. And you mentioned no Steel Venters. That is a bummer of a loss. Second straight year now they will be without him. They have yet to have him available in a regular season ever since he transferred from Eastern Washington. Had a great season his final year at Eastern in 22-23, but injuries have kept him off the court. They're going to keep him off the court this year. We don't know what his playing feature is going to look like, but he would have been a great depth piece. Probably would have started last year. Who's to say about this year? But I really like Gonzaga. I think they're a deep team with or without Steel Venters. And yeah, this is a team that is absolutely going to challenge, I think, for a national championship this year. I'd put them in a group of about 6 or 7 teams at this current moment that you could make a very legitimate case for to cut down the nets come the first weekend of April.
Oh, no question about it. And I do think that this is creme de la creme when it comes to the WCC. They should have no issues within the conference. But do you look at that conference and see any other teams that could be able to wreck the apple cart? Because their main competition over the last few years is St. Mary's. But as we know, they lose Aidan Mahaney. That is a giant loss for them. And San Francisco, they just don't feel like the same team from a season ago as well. They took some losses in the offseason, including Jonathan Mogbo, who was their top rebounder. So I think that that is going to be a really interesting conference with teams like a Loyola Marymount, for example, trying to build themselves up, but not being able to get on par with being a competitor quite like St. Mary's has been in the past few years.
Yeah, and you look at one of the biggest additions that Gonzaga made this offseason was Michael Ajayi from Pepperdine, a team there in the footprint of the WCC that was at least looking to make some strides here. And Ajayi's trajectory has been fantastic ever since coming from the JUCO route. Was invited to the NBA draft combine this last year, decided to stay in school, entered the transfer portal, and then settled on Gonzaga. So you look at that, I think that is going to be a team that is very much going to benefit from his productivity this year, obviously with the Zags. But a team that I'm kind of looking at right now, I think Washington State is going to have an opportunity in the WCC this season to kind of build off the momentum that they had. It's going to be a little easier landing than, say, if the new Pac-12 were in existence right now. I think it's going to be a little bit easier for them to maybe get their footing with this group of teams. You mentioned St. Mary's. You can never count them out. But yeah, Aidan Mahaney, that is a huge loss for them. You'd never want to see a guy like that leave, but can't blame him with his landing spot where he ended up going. So I think it is still going to be Gonzaga. I think you still are going to have St. Mary's, Randy Bennett, their head coach. But Washington State is a team that even though new head coach, a lot of new players on that roster, I still really like David Riley as a head coach. Had a chance to speak with him a few months ago once he got the job at Washington State. I think that is somebody that could really have something special going in Pullman over the next couple of years. He's very familiar with the area. I think Washington State is a team that, it's good to see them challenge for an NCAA tournament berth every once in a while. Last year was their first one in, I believe, 16 seasons. So great to see them in that setting. So I think they're a team right now that I look at could potentially make some noise in the WCC this year.
Yep, with Washington State, not going to be quite the same team that they were a season ago. When you lose that great coaching staff, when you lose all the players that you do from a season ago, that's an issue. But you also go from playing a Pac-12 schedule to playing a WCC schedule, which a WCC still a fine conference, but I do think that, to your point, bringing in so many guys from Eastern Washington, bringing in that coaching staff, that is going to be so big, and I don't think that the fall off is going to be too great there. And then the team that is going to be joining the WCC in the next few years for Seattle, I know that we talked on this podcast, I was like, man, it feels like it's now or never for Seattle to be able to make the NCAA tournament. Might be a little bit more on the horizon in the WCC, though Grand Canyon is going to still be a bear for them to be able to get through, but for Seattle, I think that it's going to be interesting for them as well, because I think that they're going to be a bunch that's going to be towards the top half of the WCC once again this year. But they're another team that is going to be in a little bit of transition. They lose Cam Tyson, that top scorer from a season ago, but they bring back a lot of, shall we say, the ancillary pieces from a season ago.
Yeah, absolutely. Kobe Williamson, one to watch out for with that Seattle U team. Yeah, you mentioned Gonzaga departing the WCC now. I wonder if Seattle U is kind of breathing a sigh of relief. Like,
they're throwing a party right
maybe,
now.
Yeah, maybe we've got a shot again to make the NCAA tournament for the first time, them in Grand Canyon. So, yeah, I think they're going to be a really, really interesting team once they get to the WCC. I think their final seasons in the WAC, they're obviously going to be very competitive. They've been competitive. They have been right there with the top of the WAC conference over the last few seasons. I think they could very much challenge for a tournament title in the WAC. I mean, that is just something that they have been so close over the last couple of years. Same goes for Eastern, actually, in the Big Sky Conference. But I think Seattle U has just been knocking on the door so hard over the last few years that eventually it's got to go their way, right? Like, that's just the law of averages would say it's got to go their way. I like what Chris Victor has done as a head coach there. I can't say enough great things about him and the job that he has done in his 3 seasons with the Red Hawks. They continue to have a lot of great momentum go their way. So hopefully heading into their final years in the WAC, they're able to knock down that door, get to the NCAA tournament, and continue that into the WCC.
Would absolutely love to see that. And a man that is knocking on the door of being one of the best, that is you, Curtis. You do everything, and you do it all so well, whether that's covering baseball, whether that's covering basketball, whether that's covering hockey, football. You're a man that does it all. You do a great job with all of your podcast work. I know that you are getting set for the upcoming college basketball season. I know that you guys over there at 710 Seattle Sports have had your finger on the pulse of this Gonzaga talk, not just over the last week or so, but you guys have been talking about this for years. So let the good people at home know it's all on tap for you, and how people are able to follow along on social media and other platforms.
Yeah, we're following along with Big Ten Media Days, which are going on this week. I believe that runs through tomorrow.
By the way, just strange to say 710 Seattle Sports following Big Ten Media Days.
Exactly. It is the weirdest world that we live in right now. But yeah, we're following Big Ten Media Days. Great Osabor getting some nice preseason recognition from the Big Ten. So we've got our eye on that. We've got our eye on all sorts of conference realignment because, like you said, Eastern is the only one that hasn't moved. So who knows where they're going to be 12 months from now, but we are definitely keeping our finger on the pulse of all that and cannot wait for college basketball season to get here, Greg. I know you can't either, and always have a blast talking about it with you.
Oh, I cannot wait until we see opening night, Oregon versus UC Riverside on the Big Ten Network, and me trying to check to see what universe I woke up in, where it's like, wait, what the heck? Shouldn't this be on the Pac-12 Network where all of 13 people are able to watch this? But no, that's the day and age that we live in college basketball. But a man that is doing a great job of rolling with all the punches and always delivers such great insight on this podcast is Curtis. So big thanks to him for joining me on Cuts Soups, now part of the VSiN family of podcasts. And if you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Cuts Soups, you're able to subscribe wherever your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one of two ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at unit_D1. Keep in mind, letters CM, they mean does not matter, so as per usual, please just send these into the timeline. The other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. And then from there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. As I mentioned before, 3 conference previews left. We've got the Big 10, the Big 12, and the SEC, and expect the SEC to be done within the next few days as well. That'll probably be the next one. And then the Big 10, the Big 12, we'll probably be doing those within the next, we'll call it about 14 or so days. And then we'll be set for what is going to be hopefully the most profitable college basketball season ever. I appreciate you tuning in today. I'm with you guys every single day on this podcast, so I'll be back with you once again tomorrow. Thank you.